The storm came without mercy that night in West Texas, 1881. Rain hammered the earth like bullets from heaven, and thunder rolled across the valley with the fury of 1,000 wild horses. Jake Garrison rode through it, all his black duster whipping behind him like broken wings, water streaming from the brim of his hat. 3 years since he'd seen these hills, these fences, this land that bore his name, but no longer felt like home. The ranch spread before him in the darkness, a collection of shadows against shadows. The main house stood like a tombstone, windows flickering with weak candlelight. He'd built that house with his own hands, cut every beam, drove every nail, all for Sarah. Now she lay beneath the old oak tree on the hill, and the house had become nothing more than wood and memories. His horse, a gray stallion named Tempest, picked its way through the mud. Jake didn't guide him. The animal knew the way better than its rider wanted to remember. Each step brought him closer to what he'd fled, what he'd abandoned, what he could no longer avoid. The telegram in his pocket, soaked through but still readable, had said only what was necessary. "Lily needs you. Come home. Mrs. Harwick." Lily, his daughter, 4 years old now, though he'd missed her last 2 birthdays. A child who looked so much like her mother that Jake's chest caved every time he tried to hold her. Sarah's eyes, Sarah's smile, Sarah's gentle way of tilting her head when curious. How could a man look at such a perfect mirror of his dead wife and not break? How could he be a father when being near his daughter felt like drowning in grief? He dismounted at the stable hands, working automatically to unsaddle Tempest. The familiar motions brought no comfort. Inside the barn, everything was exactly as he'd left it. Sarah's saddle still hung on its peg. Her riding gloves lay folded on the shelf. Even her scent seemed to linger, though Jake knew that was impossible. Lavender and sunshine, she'd always smelled of lavender and sunshine. Thunder cracked overhead, and through the barn's open door, Jake saw it. Light spilling from the main house's parlor window. Not candlelight, but something warmer, steadier. And then he heard it. Piano music. Not just any music. Sarah's song. The waltz she'd composed for their wedding day. The one she'd played every evening while pregnant with Lily. The one that had died with her in that terrible winter storm. No one else knew that song. Jake had made sure the sheet music was buried with her, clutched in her cold hands like a promise he couldn't keep. Yet there it was, floating through the rain, each note perfect, each phrase exactly as Sarah had played it. Jake's boots moved without his permission, carrying him across the yard, up the porch steps, through the front door he'd once carried Sarah across as a bride. The music grew louder, clearer. His heart hammered against his ribs. Impossible. This was impossible. He pushed open the parlor door. A woman sat at the piano, her back to him, dark hair pinned up simply. Her fingers moved across the keys with a grace that made Jake's breath catch. But it wasn't Sarah. Of course it wasn't Sarah. Sarah was dead, had been dead for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The woman's dress was plain brown calico patched at the elbows, a governess's dress. Beside her on the bench sat Lily, his Lily, her small hands folded in her lap, her eyes closed as she swayed to the music. The child who hadn't spoken a word since her mother's death, who Mrs. Harwick's letters described as lost in a world of silence, looked peaceful, almost happy. The song ended. The last note hung in the air like a ghost. The woman's hand settled in her lap. She didn't turn around. "You're home," she said quietly. Her voice carried a slight Tennessee accent, soft but clear. "Lily's been waiting." Jake couldn't speak. His throat had closed entirely. The woman turned then, and he saw her face. Young, maybe 25, with gray eyes that held too much knowledge for her years. Pretty in an understated way, with sharp cheekbones and a determined chin. But what struck Jake most was the sadness that clung to her like morning mist, a sadness that matched his own. "I'm Rose Campbell," she said, standing smoothing her skirt. "Dr. Morrison sent me 3 months ago to help with Lily's condition." That song. Jake managed his voice rough as sand. How do you know that song? Rose glanced at Lily, who had opened her eyes and was staring at her father with an expression Jake couldn't read. Fear, hope, recognition. I don't know it, Rose said carefully. Lily hummed it one day, just 3 notes over and over. The first sound she'd made in months, Mrs. Harwick said. So I followed her lead, found the melody hidden in those 3 notes, built the song around what she gave me. She paused. I hope I haven't overstepped. Jake stared at his daughter. Lily stared back. Neither moved. The silence stretched between them like a chasm 3 years wide. Then Lily stood up from the bench, walked across the room with careful, measured steps, and stopped just out of reach. She looked up at him, Sarah's eyes in a child's face, and held out her small hand. In her palm lay a wooden horse, crudely carved, one of the toys Jake had made for her before Sarah died, before everything shattered. She didn't speak, but she waited. Jake knelt slowly, his joints protesting, his hands shaking. He reached out and touched the wooden horse, his fingers brushing Lily's tiny ones. She didn't pull away. Behind them, Rose Campbell watched in silence, and outside the storm began to break. The morning after the storm, West Texas looked like God had washed it clean and hung it out to dry. Jake Garrison stood on his porch, coffee growing cold in his hand, watching the sun paint the hills gold. The ranch stretched for 2,000 acres in every direction, good grazing land bought with blood and sweat when he was barely 20. Now at 32, he felt ancient, like the limestone cliffs that bordered his property. The Double G Ranch had once been the pride of Marion County. 1,500 head of longhorn, a dozen ranch hands, contracts with the railway companies that made other men green with envy. Sarah had kept the books, her neat handwriting filling ledger after ledger, while Jake handled the cattle, the men the endless work of keeping a ranch alive. Together, they'd built something that mattered. Apart, or rather alone, Jake had let it slowly die. Mr. Garrison. He turned. Rose Campbell stood in the doorway, Lily's hand in hers. In daylight, he could see her more clearly. She wore the same patched brown dress, but her posture spoke of education breeding perhaps fallen on hard times. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, but wisps had escaped, framing a face that might have been beautiful if it ever smiled. Those gray eyes held steady on his, neither challenging nor submitting, just waiting. Miss Campbell. He nodded, then looked down at his daughter. Lily wore a blue dress he didn't recognize, her golden hair braided neatly. Sarah's hair. Sarah's perfect golden hair. Good morning, Lily. The child didn't respond, just pressed closer to Rose's skirts. Rose's free hand moved to the child's shoulder, a gesture so natural it made Jake's chest tight. She takes her breakfast at 7, Rose said. Porridge with honey, though Mrs. Harwick says she used to prefer eggs. She did. Before. Jake couldn't finish the sentence. Before her mother died. Before her father abandoned her. Before everything broke. Rose nodded as if she understood. Would you like to join us? The question surprised him. In 3 months, this stranger had apparently made herself at home in his house with his daughter in his life. Part of him wanted to be angry about that. The other part, the tired part, felt only relief. The kitchen was warm, smelling of biscuits and bacon. Mrs. Harwick stood at the stove, her gray hair pinned up tight, her back military straight, despite her 60 years. She'd been his mother's housekeeper, then his, and now, apparently, she was Lily's, the only constant in a world of variables. About time you showed your face, she said without turning around. 3 years, Jake Garrison. 3 years of me raising that child while you played at being dead. Martha. Don't you Martha me. Sit down and eat. You look like a scarecrow that lost a fight with a tornado. Jake sat. Rose guided Lily to her chair, then took the seat between father and daughter, a buffer neither had asked for, but both seemed to need. She served Lily first small portions, cutting everything into tiny bites. The child ate mechanically, her eyes never leaving her plate. Tell me about these 3 months. Jake said finally. Rose looked up from her own untouched plate. "What would you like to know?" "Everything. Start with how you came to be here." She set down her fork. "Dr. Morrison knew my late husband in Tennessee. When he heard I was seeking employment, he wrote to me about Lily. Said she needed someone with patience and understanding. Someone who knew what it was like to lose everything and still wake up the next morning. And you know that feeling?" "Yes." The word was simple final. She didn't elaborate. Mrs. Harwick set a plate in front of Jake with more force than necessary. "Miss Rose came here with nothing but a carpet bag and her brother. Didn't ask for nothing, neither just a roof and a chance to help the child. First week, Lily wouldn't even look at her. Second week, she let her brush her hair. By the end of the first month, they were inseparable. My brother Thomas," Rose added quietly. "He's simple-minded, gentle as a lamb. He helps in the stable. The horses calm him." Jake had noticed the young man that morning, maybe 17, talking softly to Tempest while brushing him down. The boy had Sarah's way with animals, that gentle touch that made even the wildest horse stand still. "He's good with them," Jake said. "Thank you. Most people just see his limitations." "Most people are fools." Rose almost smiled. "Almost." "On that, Mr. Garrison, we agree." Lily suddenly pushed back her chair and walked to the window. She stood there, one small hand pressed against the glass, staring at something only she could see. Rose started to rise, but Jake surprised himself by standing first. He walked to his daughter, knelt beside her. Outside, a red-tailed hawk circled lazily above the barn. "Your mama loved watching the hawks," he said softly. Said they were free in a way people could never be. Lily didn't respond, but she didn't move away either. After a moment, her hand moved from the glass to rest on his shoulder. The weight of that tiny hand nearly broke him. "She's better," Mrs. Harwick said from behind them. 3 months ago, she wouldn't let anyone touch her. Miss Rose changed that. Don't know how, don't care how. That woman's got magic in her, or maybe just the kind of hurt that recognizes hurt in others. Jake looked back at Rose, who was clearing the table, her movements efficient but graceful. "What hurt?" he asked quietly. Mrs. Harwick's voice dropped. "Never said exactly, but sometimes I hear her crying at night. Quiet-like, trying not to wake nobody. And that brother of hers, he wasn't born simple. Something happened to him. Something bad enough to break his mind, but not his spirit." Jake watched Rose work, noticed how her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was looking, how she kept glancing at Lily, as if afraid the child might disappear. He recognized the signs. She was running from something just like he'd been running. The only difference was she'd run towards something that needed her while he'd run away from it. "Miss Campbell," he called. She turned. "I need to know about the ranch. The real situation. Not what Martha tells me to keep me from worrying." Rose exchanged a glance with Mrs. Harwick, then nodded. "You have 40 head of cattle left. Most of the hands quit when the pay stopped coming. The fences on the north pasture are down. The well near the old barn is running dry. Your contracts with the railway expired 6 months ago, and they've gone to the Morrison spread instead." The litany of failures should have angered him. Instead, he felt oddly relieved. She wasn't trying to spare him or coddle him. She was telling him the truth. "You seem to know a lot about ranching for a governess." "My father had a small ranch before the war. I learned to read ledgers before I learned to read poetry." "And which do you prefer?" This time she did smile, just barely. "Ledgers don't lie. Poetry does nothing but." Lily turned from the window, then walked to Rose and held up her arms. Rose lifted her easily, settling the child on her hip. Lily's head dropped to Rose's shoulder, her eyes finding Jake's over the brown calico. "She's tired," Rose explained. "She doesn't sleep well at night. Never has, according to Mrs. Harwick." "Since her mother died," Jake said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, but also, I think she's waiting." "For what?" Rose met his eyes directly. "For her father to come home. Really come home. Not just his body, but all of him. The words hit like a punch. Jake wanted to argue, to say he was here. Now wasn't that enough? But looking at his daughter's solemn face at the stranger, holding her with more tenderness than he'd shown in 3 years, he knew it wasn't. Not nearly enough. Outside, the hawk cried once and disappeared beyond the hills. The morning stretched on, full of possibility and pain in equal measure. Jake Garrison was home in body, but his spirit still wandered somewhere in the wilderness of grief. The question was whether Rose Campbell, with her sad eyes and steady hands, could help him find his way back, or whether they were all just lost souls playing at being found, waiting for the next storm to remind them how broken they really were. The sun climbed higher, and somewhere in the house a clock chimed 9 times. Another day at the Double G Ranch had begun, and for the first time in 3 years it felt like it might actually matter. That evening, after Lily had been put to bed, Jake found himself alone in his study for the first time in 3 years. Dust covered everything like a shroud. Sarah's portrait still hung above the fireplace, her painted eyes following him as he poured whiskey from a bottle that had been waiting since the day she died. The amber liquid caught the lamplight, reminding him of Sarah's hair in sunshine. Rose appeared in the doorway, hesitating. "I apologize. I was looking for Mrs. Harwick. She's gone to bed. Old bones, she says, though I suspect she just wants to leave us to sort ourselves out." Jake gestured to a chair. "Sit, please." Rose entered but remained standing. "I should check on Thomas." "Your brother's fine. I saw him in the stable talking to the horses. They understand him better than people do, I think." "Yes." Her voice carried weight. "Animals don't judge. They don't see what's missing, only what's there." Jake studied her over his glass. "What happened to him?" For a long moment, Rose didn't answer. Then she moved to the window, looking out at the darkness. "My father was a judge in Tennessee, an honest one, which made him enemies. When the war ended, carpetbaggers and thugs flooded in trying to steal land from anyone too weak to fight back. Father stood against them. Testified in court, sent several to prison." She paused, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. "They came at night, 15 men, maybe 20, torches and guns. Father told us to hide in the root cellar, but Thomas wouldn't go. He was 14, thought he was man enough to fight. They made him watch while they beat Father to death. Then they decided Thomas needed a lesson too. Used a rifle butt to his head. He lived, but he was never the same. Speaks like a child. Now fears loud noises, can't remember things that happened yesterday, but recalls every detail from before that night." Jake set down his glass. "Your mother died of grief within 6 months. I was 21, suddenly responsible for a broken brother and a burned ranch." Rose turned from the window. "I married the first decent man who offered. Harold Campbell, a music teacher from Nashville. Kind, gentle, 20 years my senior. He died of consumption 2 years later, left me enough money to get to Texas, and a letter of introduction to Dr. Morrison." "And Lily. How did you know what she needed?" Rose moved to Sarah's portrait, studying it. "She's beautiful. Your wife." "She was." "Tell me about her." Jake hadn't expected that. No one had asked him to talk about Sarah since the funeral. "She was everything. Came from money back East Philadelphia. Her father sent her here to marry some cattle baron's son, make an alliance. Instead, she met me at a church social. I had dirt under my nails and couldn't dance to save my life. She said I was the first honest thing she'd seen in Texas." He poured another drink, offered one to Rose. She surprised him by accepting. "We married 3 months later. Her father cut her off, completely said she was dead to him. Sarah laughed, said she'd rather be alive with me than dead in Philadelphia society. We built this place together, board by board, fence by fence. She could shoot better than most men, ride anything with 4 legs, and still play Chopin like an angel when evening came." "How did she die?" Jake's hand tightened on his glass. "Giving birth to Lily. January blizzard worst in 20 years. Couldn't get the doctor here in time. She bled. She bled out in our bed while I held her trying to keep her warm. Her last words were, "Love her for both of us." And I can't. Every time I look at Lily, I see Sarah dying. Every smile is Sarah's smile. Every cry is Sarah's last breath. So you ran. So I ran. He drained his glass. Spent 3 years driving cattle, fighting in range wars, anything to avoid coming home. Sent money, wrote letters I never mailed. Told myself Lily was better off without a father who couldn't bear to look at her. Rose moved closer, her voice gentle. And now I'm here, and there's a stranger raising my daughter, playing my wife's piano, making this house feel alive again. And I don't know whether to be grateful or resentful. Both, Rose said simply. Feel both. It's allowed. They stood in silence, two damaged souls in a room full of ghosts. Finally, Rose spoke again. Lily doesn't just look like her mother. She has your stubbornness, your way of watching everything before deciding to trust. She's been watching you since you arrived, measuring whether you'll stay this time. What do you think? I think you want to run again. I think being here hurts more than any bullet would, but I also think you're tired of running, tired of being half alive. She set down her untouched whiskey. Your daughter needs a father, Mr. Garrison. Not a perfect one, just a present one. And what do you need, Miss Campbell? She looked surprised by the question. A safe place for Thomas. Work that matters. Maybe to hear a child laugh again. Lily doesn't laugh. Not yet, but she will. Children are resilient more than we give them credit for. They just need someone to show them it's safe to feel joy again. Jake walked to his desk, pulled out a small wooden box. Inside lay Sarah's wedding ring, a simple gold band with tiny diamonds. She wanted Lily to have this someday. Said it should go to someone who understood that love isn't about grand gestures, but small daily choices. She sounds wise. She was. She would have liked you, I think. You're both unmovable once you've decided something matters. Rose touched the ring gently, then closed the box. Keep it safe for Lily. One day she'll be ready to hear about her mother from someone who loved her, not just someone who mourns her. A knock at the door interrupted them. Thomas stood there tall but hunched his eyes worried. Miss Rose, the little girl. She's crying. Rose moved immediately, but Jake caught her arm. Let me. She looked skeptical but nodded. Jake climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. Lily's room was softly lit by a single candle. She sat up in bed, tears streaming down her face, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Jake sat on the bed's edge, uncertain. Then, surprising himself, he began to speak. Your mama used to have bad dreams, too. Said they were just thoughts getting tangled up like yarn. She'd sing to chase them away. His voice cracked. I can't sing like she did Butterfly, but I can tell you something true. You're safe, you're loved, and I'm not leaving again. Lily looked at him with Sarah's eyes, then slowly, carefully crawled into his lap. She didn't speak, but her arms went around his neck, holding tight. Jake held his daughter for the first time in 3 years, feeling her heart beat against his chest, feeling Sarah's presence not as pain, but as benediction. Rose stood in the doorway watching. When Jake looked up, she nodded once and disappeared down the hall. But her presence lingered, a quiet strength that somehow made the moment possible. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep in his arms and he'd tucked her back into bed, Jake found Rose on the porch, a shawl around her shoulders, watching the stars. Thank you, he said. For what? For keeping her whole while I was broken. Rose pulled her shawl tighter. We're all broken, Mr. Garrison. The lucky ones find other broken people who fit their sharp edges. Is that what we are? Lucky? She looked at him, then those gray eyes unreadable in the moonlight. I don't know yet. Ask me in a month. A coyote howled in the distance, and somewhere an owl called. The night was full of predators and prey hunters and hunted, but here on this porch, 2 wounded souls stood together, not quite touching, but no longer entirely alone. My father, Rose said suddenly, used to say that grief was just love with nowhere to go. Maybe that's why Lily doesn't speak. Maybe she's saving all her words for when her love finds its home again. Jake thought about that, about love and loss and the terrible space between them. And you. Where does your love go? Rose was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then so softly he almost missed it. Into songs I teach a silent child, into keeping my brother safe, into making sure another woman's daughter doesn't grow up feeling abandoned by everyone who should have stayed. The words hung between them like a promise or a challenge. Jake wasn't sure which. But standing there in the Texas darkness with Sarah's ghost finally feeling more like a blessing than a curse, he thought maybe, just maybe, they could all find their way back to something resembling whole. 3 weeks passed in an uneasy rhythm. Jake threw himself into ranch work, fixing fences from sunrise to sunset, avoiding the house except for meals. Rose maintained her routine with Lily lessons in the morning, piano in the afternoon, quiet stories at bedtime. They orbited each other like wary planets, close enough to feel the gravitational pull, but far enough to avoid collision. Then came the day of the wolves. It started innocently enough. Rose had suggested a picnic by the creek, saying Lily needed sunshine and fresh air. Mrs. Harwick packed a basket while Jake saddled 2 horses, the gentle mare Buttercup for Rose and Lily and Tempest for himself. He'd follow at a distance, he decided, keep watch without intruding on their outing. Thomas wanted to come, but the horses were spooked that morning, rolling their eyes and stamping. Something had them nervous, and Thomas was best at calming them when they stayed in familiar surroundings. So he remained at the ranch while the small party set out. The creek ran through a grove of cottonwoods about 2 miles from the house, a place where Sarah used to paint watercolors of wildflowers. Jake hadn't been there since her death, but Rose didn't know that. She'd discovered it on one of her walks with Lily, declared it perfect for their afternoon adventure. Rose rode well for a governess back straight, but relaxed one arm secure around Lily, who sat in front of her. The child wore a yellow dress that caught the light Sarah's sun hat protecting her fair skin. For a moment, watching them through the dust motes and golden grass, Jake could almost pretend things were different, that Sarah had never died, that this was his family whole and happy. But then Lily turned, looking back at him with those solemn eyes, and the illusion shattered. They reached the creek just past noon. Rose spread a blanket under the largest cottonwood, while Lily immediately went to the water's edge, fascinated by the minnows darting in the shallows. Jake tied the horses upstream, then found a spot on a large rock where he could watch without hovering. "Mr. Garrison," Rose called, "there's plenty of food." He hesitated, then joined them on the blanket. Mrs. Harwick had outdone herself: cold chicken fresh bread, apple pie, lemonade in mason jars. They ate in comfortable silence, Lily between them, occasionally pointing at things that interested her, but never speaking. "She loves water," Rose observed, watching Lily trail her fingers in the creek. "Sometimes I think she believes if she's quiet enough, she can hear what the water's saying." Sarah used to say the same thing. Said water had stories if you knew how to listen. Rose smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look younger, less burdened. "My mother believed that too. Said that's why she named me Rose after the wild roses that grew by the river on her father's land. They listened to the water and bloomed despite the drought." "Do you bloom despite the drought?" She looked at him directly. "I'm trying, Mr. Garrison. Some days are easier than others." A splash interrupted them. Lily had ventured too far into the creek, her dress soaked to the knees. Rose started to rise, but Jake was already moving, scooping his daughter up before she could slip on the moss-covered rocks. Lily didn't protest, just looked at him with wide eyes as he carried her back to the blanket. "You're all wet butterfly," he said, using the pet name without thinking. "Just like your mama that time she tried to catch frogs." Lily's hand touched his cheek, a question in her eyes. Jake swallowed hard. She was about your age, maybe a little older, convinced she could catch the biggest frog in Texas. Fell in face first, came up sputtering and laughing so hard she couldn't breathe. You should tell her more stories, Rose said softly. About her mother. Children need stories to understand who they are. Jake set Lily down, helped Rose wring out the child's hem. Their hands brushed, and neither pulled away immediately. The moment stretched fragile as spun glass. Then Tempest screamed. It wasn't a normal whinny, but a sound of pure terror. Jake was on his feet instantly, hand going to the colt at his hip. The horses were rearing, pulling at their ropes, eyes rolling white. And then he saw them. Wolves. 5 of them spread in a hunting formation along the creek bank. Not the usual coyotes that sometimes harassed the cattle, but true wolves, gray and massive, desperate enough to hunt in daylight. The drought had driven them down from the mountains, made them bold. The leader, a scarred male with yellow eyes, locked onto Lily. The child stood frozen between the blanket and the creek, too far from either adult to grab quickly. "Don't move," Jake said, voice deadly calm. "Rose, when I say run, you take Lily to that big cottonwood. Climb as high as you can." Jake. It was the first time she'd used his given name. He didn't have time to notice. The wolf pack began to close in using the practiced coordination that made them such effective killers. Jake drew his Colt knowing 6 bullets wouldn't stop 5 wolves, but hoping the sound might scare them. He fired once into the air. The wolves didn't even flinch. The leader crouched, muscles bunching for the spring. Time slowed to heartbeats. Jake saw it all, the wolf launching toward Lily, his daughter's mouth opening in a silent scream, his own body moving, but knowing he'd be too late. Then Rose was there. She came from the side like an avenging angel, slamming into Lily, just as the wolf's jaws snapped where the child had been. They rolled together, Rose curling her body around Lily protectively. The wolf skidded, turned snarling. Jake shot it through the skull. The crack of gunfire echoed off the creek banks. The other wolves hesitated, and in that moment of uncertainty, something extraordinary happened. Lily screamed, not a wordless cry, but a single clear word that cut through everything, "Papa." The sound broke Jake's world and remade it in an instant. His daughter's voice, after 3 years of silence, calling for him. He moved without thought, placing himself between the wolves and his family. And yes, that's what they were, his family, emptying his Colt with deadly precision. 2 more wolves fell. The remaining 2 fled, deciding easier prey existed elsewhere. Jake turned to find Rose sitting in the dirt, Lily clutched against her chest, both of them trembling. Blood seeped through Rose's sleeve where the wolf's claws had caught her as she'd rolled. "Papa," Lily said again, reaching for him. "Papa, Miss Rose is hurt." Jake fell to his knees beside them, gathering both into his arms. Lily was speaking. His daughter was speaking, and her first words in 3 years were to call for him to worry about Rose. "Let me see," he said gently, examining Rose's arm. 3 parallel gashes, not deep, but needing attention. "We need to get you back clean these properly." "I'm fine," Rose said, though her face was pale. "Lily, are you hurt?" The child shook her head, then buried her face in Jake's shirt. "The wolves were scary," she whispered. "But you saved me. Both of you saved me." Jake looked at Rose over his daughter's head. Her gray eyes were bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. "You could have been killed," he said roughly. "Throwing yourself at a wolf like that." "So could you," she countered. "But we weren't. We're here, we're alive, and Lily's speaking. That's what matters." He helped her stand, one arm around her waist to steady her, Lily holding his other hand. They made their way to the horses, who were still nervous but manageable. Jake lifted Lily onto Tempest, then helped Rose mount behind her, noting how she winced. "I can ride Buttercup," she protested. "Not with that arm. Hold on to Lily. I'll lead Buttercup." The ride back was slow, careful. Lily chattered the entire way, 3 years of stored words pouring out in a flood. She talked about the horses, the clouds, the flowers they passed, and most of all about how brave Miss Rose was, how strong her papa was, how the wolves had big teeth but couldn't hurt them because they were together. Mrs. Harwick nearly fainted when they arrived, Lily talking a mile a minute, while Rose swayed on her feet, blood staining her dress. Thomas ran from the stable, his simple face creased with worry for his sister. Rose hurt. He asked his words careful and slow. "I'm all right, Thomas," Rose assured him, though Jake could see she was fighting to stay upright. Jake carried her inside despite her protests, setting her gently in the kitchen chair while Mrs. Harwick fetched medical supplies. Lily refused to leave Rose's side, holding her good hand and telling anyone who'd listen how Miss Rose had fought a wolf for her. As Jake cleaned and bandaged the wounds, Rose watched him with an expression he couldn't read. "You called us your family," she said quietly so only he could hear, "when you stood between us and the wolves." He paused, then continued wrapping the bandage. "Weren't you—" "I'm the governess." "No," Jake said firmly, tying off the bandage. "You're the woman who saved my daughter, who brought her voice back, who made this house feel less like a tomb and more like a home." He met her eyes. "If that's not family, I don't know what is." Rose's breath caught. Before she could respond, Lily tugged on her skirt. "Miss Rose, will you stay forever? Please, Papa wants you to stay. I want you to stay. Even the horses want you to stay." Rose looked from Lily to Jake, then to Thomas hovering in the doorway, to Mrs. Harwick pretending not to listen while she prepared supper. "I'll stay as long as you need me," she said carefully. "Forever then," Lily declared with a child's certainty. "We'll need you forever." That night, after Lily had finally talked herself to sleep, and Thomas had been reassured multiple times that his sister was fine, Jake found Rose on the porch again. Her bandaged arm was in a sling, but she looked peaceful watching the stars. "Thank you," he said, joining her on the bench, "for saving her, for bringing her back to us." "You saved us both," Rose reminded him. "Those wolves would never have touched either of you. Not while I breathed." The fierceness in his own voice surprised him. "I failed Sarah. I failed Lily for 3 years. I won't fail again." Rose turned to face him fully. "You didn't fail Sarah. Sometimes death just comes no matter how much we love someone. And Lily, you came back. That's what matters." They sat quietly, shoulders almost touching. The night sounds of the ranch surrounded them, horses shifting in the stable cattle, lowing in the distance, the eternal whisper of wind through grass. "She called me Papa," Jake said wonderingly. "After all this time, all my failures, she still called for me. Because you're still her father. Love doesn't disappear just because we're afraid or hurt or lost." Rose's voice was gentle. "It waits. It endures. It forgives." Jake thought about that, about love's patience and resilience. Then, surprising himself, he reached over and took Rose's uninjured hand. She didn't pull away. "Stay," he said. "Not as the governess, not as an employee. Stay as family. You and Thomas both. This place is big enough for all of us, empty enough to need filling with something besides ghosts." Rose was quiet for so long he thought she'd refuse. Then she squeezed his hand gently. "We'll stay. But Jake, I'm not Sarah. I can't replace her. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to be Rose, the woman who teaches my daughter music and courage, who makes your brother feel safe, who looks at me and sees more than just a broken man running from grief." "What do you see when you look at me?" she asked. Jake considered his words carefully. "I see someone who understands that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born to. I see someone who's been through hell, but still believes in tomorrow. I see hope, Rose. For the first time in 3 years, I see hope." A shooting star streaked across the sky. Rose smiled, that rare, transformative smile. "Then we'll stay. We'll all stay. And maybe together we can build something new from all these broken pieces." The wolves didn't return that night, or any night after. But something else had come home to the Double G Ranch, the possibility of healing, the promise of family, and the first fragile notes of a love song neither Rose nor Jake expected to hear again. The news of the wolf attack spread through Marion County like wildfire. Within 2 days, neighbors Jake hadn't seen in years came calling, bringing casseroles and curiosity in equal measure. They wanted to see the governess who'd fought a wolf barehanded, the silent child who'd found her voice. And most of all, they wanted to understand what was happening at the Double G Ranch. Jake stood in his parlor, uncomfortable in his Sunday clothes, watching Rose navigate the social waters with a grace that surprised him. She wore a borrowed dress of Mrs. Harwick's taken in at the seams, her bandaged arm hidden beneath a shawl. She served tea like she'd been born to it, deflecting invasive questions with polite non-answers. "Such a brave thing you did, Miss Campbell," gushed Mrs. Morrison, the doctor's wife. Though one wonders what a governess was doing out alone with the child so far from the house. "Mr. Garrison was with us," Rose replied smoothly. "He's the one who killed the wolves. I merely did what anyone would do for a child in danger." "Not anyone," said Mr. Henderson from the neighboring ranch. "Most folks would have frozen or run. You've got steel in you, miss." Lily, dressed in her best blue dress, clung to Rose's good hand, occasionally whispering things that made Rose smile. The child's voice, after 3 years of silence, was the real miracle everyone had come to witness. "She speaks so well," Mrs. Morrison observed, as if she'd never been silent at all. "Children are resilient," Rose said. "They just need the right moment to remember who they are." Jake watched it all from the corner, nursing a whiskey he didn't want feeling like a stranger in his own home. These people had written him off when he'd written Lily off as damaged, written the ranch off as dying. Now they circled like vultures trying to understand what had changed. What had changed was Rose. After the visitors finally left, Jake found her in the kitchen helping Mrs. Harwick with dishes despite her injured arm. Lily had fallen asleep on the parlor sofa, exhausted from all the attention. Thomas was in the stable, more comfortable with horses than house guests. "You handled them well," Jake said. Rose dried a plate one-handed. "I've had practice. After my father died, the whole county came to gawk at our misfortune. You learned to smile and say nothing of substance." "They'll talk," Mrs. Harwick warned. "Young woman living here unmarried with an unmarried man. Doesn't matter that I'm here too, or that she's got her brother. People love scandal more than truth." Rose set down the plate carefully. "Then I should leave." "No." The word came out harsher than Jake intended. Both women looked at him. "I mean, you can't leave. Lily needs you. She's speaking again because of you." "She's speaking again because she felt safe enough to," Rose corrected. "Because you came home. Because we were both there when she needed us. But if my presence here damages your reputation, or hers—" "Hang reputation," Jake said. "Hang the whole county's opinion." Mrs. Harwick made a disapproving sound. "Easy for a man to say. It's not your character they'll question. It's Miss Rose they'll call Loose Lily, they'll say is being raised improper." The old woman was right, and Jake knew it. In the 3 weeks since the wolf attack, he'd noticed the looks when he went to town for supplies, the whispers that followed Rose when she took Lily to church, the way even Thomas was watched with suspicion, as if his simple nature hid something sinister. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He walked the house like a ghost, ending up in Sarah's studio, a room he'd kept locked since her death. Moonlight filtered through dusty windows, illuminating canvases covered with sheets. He pulled one back, revealing Sarah's last painting, the view from their bedroom window at sunrise, unfinished, the sky still waiting for color. She was talented. He turned to find Rose in the doorway, a candle in her hand. "You should be resting. Your arm is healing." "I couldn't sleep either." She entered the room, looking at the covered paintings. "May I?" Jake nodded. Together, they uncovered Sarah's work landscapes of the ranch, portraits of the horses, sketches of baby Lily, and in the corner, a self-portrait Sarah had done while pregnant, her hand resting on her swollen belly, her expression serene. She was beautiful, Rose said softly. Inside and out, I think. She was everything good in my world, Jake agreed. When she died, all the color went with her. Until. He turned to face her. Until you came. You and your music and your quiet strength. You brought color back, Rose. Not the same colors, but new ones. Ones I didn't know existed. Rose set down her candle, her face half in shadow. Jake, what are you saying? I'm saying I have a solution to our reputation problem. A practical solution that would protect you, give Thomas a permanent home, and ensure Lily keeps the only mother she's known since Sarah. Mother, I'm her governess. She calls you Mama Rose when she thinks I'm not listening. Did you know that Rose's breath caught? I've told her not to. Why? Because it's improper, or because you don't feel that way about her. Because I have no right, Rose said fiercely. She's not mine to love that way. But you do. Love her that way. Rose turned away, but not before Jake saw tears on her cheeks. Of course I do. How could I not? She's extraordinary. Brave and sweet and so hungry for love it breaks my heart. Then marry me. The words fell between them like stones in still water. Rose went completely still. A business arrangement, Jake continued quickly. Protection for you and Thomas, a mother for Lily, help running the ranch. I'm not offering love, Rose. I don't know if I have that to give anymore, but I can offer respect, partnership, a good life. Rose turned slowly, her gray eyes unreadable. You're offering me a cold marriage to solve a social problem. I'm offering you a family, Jake corrected. Maybe it starts cold, but Lily's warmth alone could thaw an ice age. And maybe in time you might forget you're supposed to be dead inside. Rose's voice held an edge. Maybe you might remember that your heart still beats, even if it's broken. Jake flinched. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is you proposing marriage like it's a business contract. What's not fair is both of us pretending we don't feel the pull between us. What's not fair is that we're both so damaged we can't just admit that maybe possibly we could help each other heal. She moved closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used. I won't be your ghost, Jake. I won't be the woman you marry to avoid scandal while you pine for your dead wife. If I marry you, it will be as myself present and real and demanding more than just respect. What would you demand? Honesty, partnership, the possibility of joy again for all of us. She reached up, touched his face gently with her unbandaged hand. I've been married for convenience before. Harold was kind, but we were strangers until the day he died. I won't do that again. If we marry, I want to know you, Jake Garrison. All of you, even the broken parts. Especially the broken parts. Jake caught her hand, held it against his cheek. And if I don't know how to do that, if I've forgotten how to be known, then we learn together. We stumble and fail and try again. But we do it honestly, not hiding behind propriety or convenience. She pulled her hand away. Think about it. If you can offer me a real marriage, a real partnership, then ask me again. But don't offer me half a life, Jake. I've had that. It's not enough anymore. She left him standing among Sarah's paintings, surrounded by the past. But her words lingered, challenging him to choose the future. The next morning, Jake found Thomas in the stable, carefully braiding Buttercup's mane. The young man looked up with his gentle smile. Mr. Jake, horse is happy today. Are you happy, Thomas? Thomas considered this seriously. Happy here. Rose safe. Lily talks. Horse is kind. He paused. You sad, though. Makes Rose sad, too. Out of the mouths of babes, Jake thought, or those with simple hearts who saw more clearly than anyone else. Thomas, would you like to stay here forever? You and Rose. Thomas nodded enthusiastically. Forever good. But Rose say we might leave. People talking mean things. What if you didn't have to leave? What if this was your home, permanent-like? Thomas's face lit up. Would like that. Could take care of horses forever. Watch Lily grow up. See Rose smile more. She doesn't smile enough. Smiles for Lily. Smiles for me. But when she thinks nobody looking, she's sad. Like you, Mr. Jake, both sad when alone. Jake left the stable with Thomas's words echoing in his head. He found Mrs. Harwick in the garden pulling weeds with violent efficiency. "Spit it out," she said without looking up. "You've got that look your father had when he was about to do something either brilliant or stupid." "I asked Rose to marry me." Mrs. Harwick straightened her back, cracking. "About damn time. What did she say?" "She said no. Or rather, she said not, unless I meant it. Really meant it." "Smart woman. You planning to mean it." Jake sat on the garden bench, suddenly tired. "Martha, am I capable of meaning it? Of being a real husband again?" The old woman came over, sat beside him with a grunt. "Jake Garrison, I've known you since you were born. Watched you grow from a wild boy to a good man. Watched you love Sarah with everything you had. Watched you break when she died." She patted his hand, dirt and all. "But here's what you're not seeing. You never stopped being capable of love. You just got scared of the pain that comes with it. The pain nearly killed me, but it didn't. You're here. That girl needs a mother, and whether you planned it or not, she's chosen Rose. Thomas needs a home where people won't torment him for being simple. Rose needs a man who sees her worth, not just her usefulness. And you stubborn fool, need all of them. What if I fail them? Then you fail. But at least you'll fail trying, instead of failing by not trying at all." That evening, Jake found Rose reading to Lily in the parlor, Thomas listening from his spot by the fire. It was a scene of such domestic peace it made his chest ache. This was what he'd run from, not just pain, but the possibility of happiness after pain. "Rose," he said, "could we talk privately?" She looked up, marked her place in the book. "Lily Thomas, why don't you help Mrs. Harwick with supper?" When they were alone, Jake knelt beside her chair, pulled out a small box from his pocket. Inside was not Sarah's ring, but his mother's, a simple silver band with a small sapphire. "Rose Campbell," he said, his voice rough but steady. "I'm asking you again, not for convenience or propriety, or to solve any problems. I'm asking because when you're not here, the house feels empty, even when it's full, because Lily loves you, and somehow that's given me permission to maybe love again too, because you see me, all of me, and don't run, because you fought a wolf for my daughter and made me remember what it means to protect what matters." He took a breath. "I can't promise I'll be easy to live with. I can't promise I won't have bad days where Sarah's ghost feels more real than the present. But I can promise to try, to be present, to be honest, to be yours if you'll have me." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "You mean it. You actually mean it. Every word." She slipped from the chair to kneel with him, their faces level. Then, yes, Jake Garrison. Yes to the trying. Yes to the stumbling. Yes to building something new from all our broken pieces. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her, gently tasting tears and hope in equal measure. From the doorway came a delighted squeal. Lily stood there, bouncing on her toes. "You're getting married. Miss Rose will be my mama for real." "For real," Rose confirmed, opening her arms. Lily flew into them, then pulled Jake into the embrace. "Forever?" Lily asked. "Forever," Jake promised, holding his girls, because that's what they were, now his girls, his family, his chance at life after death. The wedding was small and quick, held in the parlor 2 weeks later, with only Mrs. Harwick, Thomas, Lily, and Dr. Morrison as witnesses. Rose wore Sarah's wedding dress, let out at the seams and hemmed shorter, but Jake didn't mind. It seemed right somehow, the past making room for the future. Lily threw wildflower petals with enthusiasm, and Thomas held the rings, his face serious with responsibility. "Do you, Jake, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Dr. Morrison asked. "I do." The words came easier than Jake expected. "Do you, Rose, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." Her voice was steady, her gray eyes clear. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Texas, I pronounce you man and wife." Jake kissed his bride gently, aware of their audience, aware of the newness of it all. Rose's lips were soft, tasting faintly of the mint tea she'd drunk for courage. When they parted, Lily clapped, and Thomas smiled his sweet smile, and Mrs. Harwick wiped her eyes with her apron. That first night as husband and wife, they stood awkwardly in the bedroom that had been Jake's and Sarah's. Rose had insisted on moving there, saying the master bedroom shouldn't stand empty like a shrine. But now, faced with the bed where Sarah had died, where Lily had been born, neither knew how to proceed. "We don't have to," Jake started. "I know," Rose said. She walked to the window, looking out at the moon-silvered ranch. "But we should at least share the room. Lily will notice if we don't, and children know when adults are pretending." They lay side by side that night, not touching two wounded souls learning to exist in the same space. But sometime near dawn, Jake woke to find Rose curled against him, seeking warmth in her sleep. He held still, afraid to wake her, afraid to admit how right it felt. The first week of marriage brought challenges neither had anticipated. Rose tried to take over the household accounts and discovered Jake had been barely keeping track of expenses for 3 years. The ledgers were a mess of half-recorded sales and forgotten debts. "How have you been surviving?" she asked, spreading papers across the dining table. "Selling cattle when I needed money, trading horses for supplies." Jake rubbed his neck, embarrassed. "Sarah always handled the books." "Well, I handle them now," Rose said firmly. "And from what I can see, we're about 6 months from bankruptcy, if something doesn't change." "That bad? That bad? You've got 40 head of cattle when you should have hundreds. No contracts with the railways. 3 ranch hands when you need at least 10. And apparently you owe Henderson's ranch $200 for a bull that died last year." Jake sank into a chair. "I forgot about that." Rose studied him. Then her expression softened. "We'll figure it out. I've managed with less. But Jake, you need to decide, do you want to save this ranch or let it die?" "Save it," he said without hesitation. "It's Lily's inheritance, Sarah's dream. Then we work, both of us, together." She was true to her word. Rose threw herself into ranch life with a determination that surprised everyone. She was up before dawn, making breakfast for the hands they still had, packing lunches, mending clothes. By the second week, she was riding the perimeter with Jake, learning the land, understanding what needed fixing. "That whole section of fence is down," she observed, pointing to the eastern boundary. "No wonder the cattle drift onto Henderson's land." "Been meaning to fix it," Jake admitted. "We fix it tomorrow," Rose decided. "All of us. Even Thomas can help. He's stronger than he looks." Thomas proved her right. He might be simple-minded, but his body was strong and his hands were clever. He could hold a fence post steady, while Jake hammered, could carry supplies without tiring, and the work seemed to bring him joy. "Good work," he'd say after each section was complete. Making home better. Lily appointed herself water-bearer, bringing canteens and sometimes wildflowers to brighten their day. She chattered constantly now, making up for 3 years of silence. Her favorite topic was how happy she was that Miss Rose was now Mama Rose, for real and official. But the real test came when Jake tried to buy more cattle. They rode to the autumn livestock auction in town, Rose in her mended brown dress, Jake in his least worn shirt. They had scraped together $300. Their entire savings, plus what Rose had hidden in her carpet bag, money from Harold's life insurance she'd been saving for emergencies. "This is an emergency," she'd said, putting the bills in Jake's hand. "We invest in the ranch, or we lose everything." The auction was crowded with ranchers, all eyeing the same small herd of quality longhorns. Jake recognized most of them men who'd once treated him as an equal, but now looked through him like he was invisible. The years of absence had cost him more than money. It had cost him standing. "Garrison," Henderson acknowledged coldly. "Heard you got married again." "I did." "Rose, this is Bill Henderson. Bill, my wife." Henderson barely glanced at her. Also heard you're trying to rebuild. Bit late for that, isn't it? Never too late to work honest land, Rose said quietly. Henderson laughed. Honest land? Your husband ran off and left it to rot. Left his baby girl, too. Not much honest in that. Jake's fists clenched, but Rose's hand on his arm stopped him. You're right, she said calmly. He made mistakes, but he came back. He's trying to make it right. How many men could say the same? The auction began before Henderson could reply. The bidding was fierce, prices rising quickly. Jake bid on a small group of heifers, but Henderson outbid him. He tried for a young bull, but the Morrison Ranch took it. By noon, they'd bought nothing, and their money was starting to look pitiful against the wealthy ranchers' deep pockets. Last lot of the day, the auctioneer called. 10 head of mixed cattle. Bit scrawny, been ranging wild, but good bloodlines for those willing to work them. Nobody bid. The cattle were indeed scrawny ribs, showing coats dull, but Rose studied them with sharp eyes. The one on the left, she whispered to Jake. Look at her build under the poor condition. That's quality breeding. They just need food and care. Starting bid $50, the auctioneer said hopefully. 50, Jake called out. Nobody else bid. They got all 10 cattle for $50, leaving money for feed and supplies. Henderson laughed as they arranged transport. 10 sick cows. That'll save your ranch for sure, Garrison. But Rose had been right. Once they got the cattle home and started feeding them properly, their true quality showed. Within a month, they'd filled out coats gleaming. The lead cow, whom Lily named Princess, turned out to be pregnant with twins. How did you know? Jake asked Rose one evening as they watched the small herd graze. My father taught me to look past surface problems to foundation strength, she said. Applies to cattle and people both. Their days fell into rhythm. Jake worked the ranch while Rose managed the house and books. Thomas helped everywhere, his simple joy infectious. Lily followed them all like a shadow, absorbing everything. In the evenings, they gathered for dinner, a real family meal with conversation and laughter. But it was the nights that remained complicated. They still shared a bed, still maintained careful distance. But sometimes Jake would wake to find Rose crying, silently turned away from him. Sometimes she woke to find him sitting at the window, staring at Sarah's grave on the hill. One night, about a month into their marriage, a thunderstorm shook the house. Lily came running frightened and crawled between them in bed. As she settled, her small body created a bridge, and somehow Jake's arm ended up around both his daughter and his wife. Rose didn't pull away. Tell us a story, Papa, Lily demanded, her fear forgotten in the safety of their presence. What kind of story? About Mama Sarah and you, and Mama Rose and you, and how we all became a family. Jake felt Rose tense slightly. They hadn't talked about how to handle Sarah's memory with Lily. Well, Jake began carefully. Once upon a time, there was a cowboy who thought he knew everything about ranching, but nothing about love. Then he met a beautiful lady from the East who painted pictures and laughed like sunshine. Mama Sarah, Lily said confidently. Yes. And they were very happy, and they had a beautiful little girl. But then the mama had to go to heaven, and the cowboy was so sad he forgot how to be happy. He ran away, leaving the little girl with Mrs. Harwick. That was bad, Lily said seriously. Very bad, Jake agreed. But then something magical happened. A lady came from Tennessee with music in her fingers and kindness in her heart. She taught the little girl to find her voice again. And when the cowboy finally came home, the lady helped him remember how to be brave. Mama Rose, Lily said, snuggling closer to Rose. Yes, and the cowboy realized that sometimes God sends you two loves in a lifetime, not to replace each other, but to build on each other. He searched for the right image, like building a house. The foundation is one love, strong and permanent, but you can build new rooms on that foundation, rooms full of new love and new hope. Rose's hand found his in the darkness, squeezing gently. "So now we're a family with 2 mamas," Lily concluded happily. "One in heaven watching over us, and one here taking care of us." "Is that okay with you?" Rose asked softly. "It's perfect," Lily yawned. "Thomas says families are like quilts, made of different pieces but warm when stitched together. The wisdom of children and simple minds," Jake thought. They fell asleep like that, the 3 of them, while thunder rolled overhead and rain washed the ranch clean. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A wagon rolled up, and 3 men Jake didn't recognize climbed down. They wore city clothes and carried an air of authority that made him wary. Mr. Garrison, the leader, a thin man with spectacles, extended his hand. "I'm James Crawford from the Fort Worth Railway Company. We heard you might be interested in renewing your cattle contracts." Jake blinked. How did you hear that?" Crawford smiled. "Your wife sent us a very compelling letter. Included figures showing your ranch's past productivity and projected future yields. Very impressive analysis. We don't usually see such thorough documentation from ranchers." Jake looked at Rose, who stood on the porch trying to appear innocent. "She did she?" "Indeed. We're prepared to offer you a contract for regular cattle shipments, assuming you can guarantee minimum numbers." They spent the morning negotiating. Rose joined them at the table, her knowledge of numbers and contracts surprising the railway men. By noon, they had a deal that would save the ranch if they could deliver. After the men left, Jake cornered Rose in the kitchen. "When did you write to them?" 2 weeks ago. I found their old correspondence in your desk, figured it was worth trying." She looked uncertain. "Are you angry?" I should have asked, but you were so overwhelmed with the fence repairs, and I thought— He kissed her, cutting off her words. It was different from their wedding kiss, deeper, more certain. When they parted, Rose looked dazed. "Not angry," Jake said roughly. "Grateful, amazed, maybe a little bit in awe. Of a letter, of you, of having someone who fights for this place as hard as I do, of not being alone in this anymore." That night, they made love for the first time, tentative and gentle 2 people, learning each other's bodies and hearts. Afterward, Rose lay with her head on Jake's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I love you," she said quietly. "I didn't expect to, but I do." Jake was quiet so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, "I love you too. Different from before, but not less. Maybe even more, because it's chosen, not just fallen into. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Rose murmured. A cry from down the hall interrupted them. Not Lily, but Thomas having one of his nightmares. Rose started to get up, but Jake stopped her. "I'll go. He's family now." He found Thomas sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face. "Bad men," Thomas whispered, "hurting Papa, making me watch." Jake sat on the bed, put his arm around the young man's shoulders. "The bad men are gone, Thomas. You're safe here. Rose is safe. We're all safe." Thomas leaned into him, this boy in a man's body who'd seen too much. "You good man, Mr. Jake. Keep us safe." "Always," Jake promised. "This is your home now. Forever home." When he returned to bed, Rose was crying. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being kind to him. Not everyone is. He's a good soul, pure. The world needs more like him." They settled back together, Jake curled around Rose protectively. Outside, coyotes called in the distance, but inside the house was warm and safe. They'd built something in these first weeks of marriage, something stronger than paper contracts or social propriety. They'd built trust partnership, the beginning of deep love. "Jake," Rose said sleepily, "the cattle drive to fulfill the railway contract. It'll be dangerous. We'll manage. Together." "Together," he confirmed. "You, me, Thomas, even Lily in her way, the whole Garrison clan." "I like the sound of that," Rose murmured, drifting toward sleep. "The Garrison clan, our family." Jake held his wife and thought about families, how they could be born of blood or choice, how they could be broken and rebuilt, how love could die and be reborn in new forms. The Double G Ranch was coming back to life, and with it, so was he. So were all of them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. They needed more cattle, more hands, more time than they had. But tonight, his wife was in his arms. His daughter slept peacefully down the hall, and his brother-in-law, strange to think of Thomas that way but right, felt safe under their roof. Sarah would be happy, he thought. She'd always said the ranch was meant to be full of life and laughter. Now it was beginning to be again different from before, but perhaps deeper, richer earned, rather than simply given. They were building something new on the foundation of something lost, and maybe that was the best anyone could do with grief, not forget it, but build beyond it. The moon set, and the sun rose, and the Double G Ranch faced another day, stronger than yesterday, ready for tomorrow, a family forged from sorrow, but defined by hope. The first Sunday in November brought unexpected snow, early even for Texas. Rose stood at the church entrance, shaking white flakes from her shawl, while Jake helped Lily with her coat. Thomas watched the snow with wonder, catching flakes on his tongue like a child. They made an odd family, Rose thought, but they were a family nonetheless. The Garrisons, someone whispered as they entered. Look at them acting like nothing strange about the whole arrangement. Rose kept her head high, her hand on Lily's shoulder. She'd learned long ago that whispers couldn't hurt you if you didn't let them. But Jake's jaw was tight, his shoulders tense. He still wasn't used to being the subject of gossip. They took their usual pew, third from the front, the same one the Garrisons had occupied for 20 years. But today, Mrs. Henderson deliberately moved her family from the pew behind them to one across the aisle. The snub was obvious, deliberate. Why did Mrs. Henderson move? Lily whispered too loud. Hush, sweetheart, Rose murmured. Reverend Cole took the pulpit, his weathered face kind but tired. Today's scripture comes from the book of Ruth. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people. Rose felt Jake's hand find hers squeeze gently. The sermon was about loyalty, about choosing family, about strangers becoming beloved. Whether the Reverend meant it for them or not, it felt like a blessing. After church, the congregation gathered in the yard for the monthly social. Tables groaned with food. Children ran between the headstones playing tag, and adults clustered in groups defined by status and acceptance. The Garrisons stood alone by the water pump, a small island unto themselves. Mama Rose, why won't Lucy Henderson play with me anymore? Lily asked, watching her former friend run past without acknowledgement. Before Rose could answer, a voice cut through the air. Because decent folks don't let their children associate with improper situations. Mrs. Henderson stood there, her cronies flanking her like soldiers. She was a formidable woman, built like a fence post, and just as rigid, married to the richest rancher in the county. Mrs. Henderson, Jake said coldly, if you have something to say, I'll say it plain then. This woman appears from nowhere, moves into your home, while your poor wife's barely cold in the ground, and now she's got her hooks in you and your fortune. Fortune? Rose laughed, surprising everyone, including herself. Mrs. Henderson, we have 40 cattle, a mortgaged ranch, and 3 ranch hands. If I wanted a fortune, I'd have aimed considerably higher. Don't you sass me, girl. We all know what you are. A gold digger who saw a grieving man and pounced. Thomas made a distressed sound, not understanding the words, but feeling the hostility. Lily pressed against Rose's skirts. Jake stepped forward, but Rose stopped him with a gentle touch. What I am, Rose said quietly but clearly, is a widow who lost everything and found a second chance at family. What I am is a woman who loves a child not born to me as if she were my own. What I am is a wife trying to help her husband save his ranch and rebuild his life. If that makes me a gold digger in your eyes, Mrs. Henderson, then perhaps you need spectacles. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. Mrs. Henderson's face flushed red. "You think you're clever, but we know the truth. That simpleton brother of yours, that mysterious past, showing up right when Jake was vulnerable? It's all too convenient." Convenient? Jake's voice was dangerous now. "You want to know what's convenient? Having neighbors who smile to your face while hoping for your failure. Having people who ate at my table when Sarah was alive now treat my new wife like she's beneath them. That's convenient for small-minded folks who need someone to look down on. Jake Garrison, your mother would be appalled." "My mother," Jake interrupted, "would be appalled at Christians acting without charity. She'd be appalled at a community turning its back on a woman who saved my daughter's life, who brought her voice back, who's worked herself to the bone trying to save a ranch that provides jobs and beef for this county." An older voice spoke from the crowd. "The boy's right." Everyone turned. Old Man Thompson, the town's founder and largest landowner at 93, pushed through the crowd with his walking stick. He was rich enough and old enough that no one dared contradict him. "I knew Jake's mother and his grandmother before that," Thompson continued. "Good women who understood that families come in all shapes. This young lady here fought off wolves for the child. That tells me everything I need to know about her character." He walked up to Rose, tipped his hat. "Mrs. Garrison, I hear you're rebuilding the Double G. Might be I have some extra hands could help with your cattle drive next month. Good men who need work." Rose's eyes widened. "Mr. Thompson, we couldn't afford. Did I mention payment? I'm offering neighbors helping neighbors. The Double G provided beef for this town during the drought of '61, kept folks from starving. Some of us remember our debts." Mrs. Henderson sputtered. "Richard Thompson, you can't seriously support this arrangement." "What arrangement? A legal marriage, blessed by the church, a family taking care of each other. Seems to me that's exactly what I should support." He looked around the crowd. "Anyone else remember when community meant something? When we helped each other instead of tearing each other down?" Dr. Morrison stepped forward. "The Double G could use medical supplies for the cattle drive. I'll donate what I can." "They'll need food for the hands," added Mrs. Cole, the Reverend's wife. "I'll organize a cooking bee." One by one, others stepped forward. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. The community was dividing, choosing sides, and not all were choosing Mrs. Henderson's harsh judgment. Thomas, who had been silent throughout, suddenly spoke. "Rose good," he said loudly. "Rose kind. Make Lily happy. Make Mr. Jake smile. Make horses calm. Why lady angry at good?" The simple honesty of it made several people shift uncomfortably. From the mouths of babes and innocents came truth too plain to deny. Mrs. Henderson gathered her dignity and her followers. "Mark my words, this will end badly. It always does when people forget propriety and position." After she left, taking about half the congregation with her, those who remained surrounded the Garrisons, not with hostility, but with curiosity and tentative acceptance. "Is it true you know numbers and letters?" asked Mary Stewart, the schoolteacher. "I could use help with the older students." "I'd be happy to help," Rose said, still stunned by the sudden support. "My Jenny's been silent since her pa died," another woman said quietly. "Like your Lily was. Would you talk to her? Maybe teach her some music?" And just like that, Rose found herself drawn into the community, not fully accepted, but no longer completely rejected. Jake watched with something like wonder as his wife navigated the social waters, building bridges where he'd have burned them. That evening, a rider approached the ranch at full gallop. Jake grabbed his rifle memories of his ranger days flooding back, but it was just a boy from town gasping for breath. "Mr. Garrison, come quick. There's trouble at the Henderson place." They rode hard, Jake, Rose, and even Thomas, leaving Lily with Mrs. Harwick. The Henderson ranch was in chaos. Their prize bull had gone mad, possibly rabid, and had cornered Bill Henderson and his youngest son in the barn. The bull, worth more than most houses, stood between them and safety foam dripping from its mouth, eyes wild. "Shoot it!" Mrs. Henderson was screaming. "Someone shoot it." "That's $1,000 bull," someone protested. That's my husband and son. Jake assessed the situation quickly. The bull was definitely sick dangerous, but shooting it would mean the Hendersons losing their breeding program's cornerstone. He looked at Thomas. Can you calm it? Thomas studied the animal, then shook his head. Too sick, too angry, but he pointed to the loft. Could drop something, scared away from them. It was a good plan. Jake climbed to the loft while Rose and Thomas created a distraction. When the bull turned toward the noise, Jake dropped a heavy feed bag near it, startling it enough that it charged away from the trapped men. Henderson and his son scrambled to safety. The bull had to be put down. There was no choice. But Jake did it cleanly, respectfully, a single shot that ended its suffering. In the silence after Henderson approached him, "You could have let it gore me, after how I've treated you and yours." "Could have," Jake agreed, "but that's not who we are." Henderson looked at Rose, really looked at her for the first time. "My wife's wrong about you. I can see that now. You could have stayed safe at home, but you came to help." "Neighbors help neighbors," Rose said simply. "Mr. Thompson reminded us of that today." Henderson nodded slowly. "The Double G needs cattle for that railway contract. I've got 50 head I could spare. Fair price payment after your drive." Jake's eyes widened. "Bill, it's business," Henderson said gruffly. "But it's also right. Your father helped me get started 20 years ago. Time I return the favor." Word of the rescue spread quickly. By the next morning, 3 more ranchers had offered cattle on credit. The schoolhouse sent word that they'd take beef for their winter stores. The general store extended credit for supplies. But not everyone was warming to the Garrisons. Mrs. Henderson's faction remained hostile, spreading rumors that grew wilder with each telling. Rose was a Confederate spy. Thomas was dangerous. Jake had been cursed by Sarah's ghost. The stories would have been laughable if they weren't so damaging. The situation came to a head when Jenny Stewart, the silent girl Rose had been helping, suddenly spoke during a music lesson. Her first word in 6 months was prettier, describing Rose's playing. Her mother was so grateful she proclaimed it a miracle which only fueled the rumors. Now Rose was either a witch or a saint, depending on who was talking. "I don't understand people," Rose said one evening, exhausted from the constant scrutiny. "I'm just teaching children music and helping my husband ranch. Why does that threaten them so, Mrs.?" Harwick, practical as always, had an answer. "Because you came from outside and made things better. That suggests things needed bettering, and folks don't like mirrors that show their flaws." A letter arrived that week that complicated everything further. It was addressed to Rose from Tennessee. Jake watched her face pale as she read it. "What is it?" She handed him the letter with trembling hands. It was from a lawyer. Her father's conviction had been overturned posthumously. He'd been innocent of the charges that led to his execution. The state was offering compensation, $5,000, and restoration of the family land. "Rose, this is wonderful. You're vindicated. Your father is still dead," she said flatly. "Thomas is still broken, and now I have to decide whether to go back to Tennessee to claim it or stay here where half the town hates me." "That's not a decision," Jake said firmly. "This is your home. We'll send Thomas to claim it if needed, or hire a lawyer." "You don't understand." Rose stood pacing. "If I take that money, I'm not a gold digger anymore. I'm a woman of means who chose to marry a struggling rancher. That changes everything." She was right. It would change how people saw them, their marriage, their arrangement. Jake thought about it, then made a decision that surprised him. "Then we use it to help the town, build a school addition, help families hurt by the drought. Show them who you really are." Rose stared at him. "Give away $5,000. Invest it," Jake corrected. "In our community, in our future here. Make it impossible for them to hate you when their children are learning in a building you helped fund." That's either brilliant or insane. Both, just like this marriage. That Sunday, Rose stood in church and announced her intention. The silence was deafening. Then Old Man Thompson started clapping, followed by Dr. Morrison the Reverend, and gradually most of the congregation. Mrs. Henderson stood abruptly. This proves nothing except that she's trying to buy our approval. No, Rose said calmly. It proves that I'm choosing to plant roots here, that I believe in this community enough to invest my family's blood money in its future, that I want my daughter, yes, my daughter, because that's what Lily is to me, to grow up in a town that values education and growth over gossip and judgment. The pledge shifted something fundamental in the community's perception. Rose wasn't an outsider trying to take. She was a member trying to give. The school board, initially skeptical, accepted her donation with growing enthusiasm as she insisted on no naming rights, no special treatment, just better facilities for all children. The cattle drive was 3 weeks away. The ranch buzzed with activity as preparations intensified. True to his word, Thompson sent 5 experienced hands. Henderson's cattle arrived healthy and strong. The cookhouse was stocked by churchwomen who decided Rose was good people after all. One evening, Jake found Rose teaching Thomas to read using the Bible. The young man struggled but persisted, his finger following each word as Rose patiently guided him. "Good job, Thomas," she encouraged. "You're getting better every day." "Want to read to Lily?" Thomas said. "Be good uncle." "You already are a good uncle," Lily piped up from where she was practicing her letters. "The best uncle in Texas," Thomas beamed. These moments, Jake thought these quiet domestic scenes were worth more than all the cattle in Texas. They'd built something here, something precious and precarious. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Bill Henderson, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. "Jake rose. I need to speak with you, privately." They stepped onto the porch. Henderson shifted nervously. "My wife's planning something. I don't know what, but she's been writing letters, meeting with lawyers from Austin. She can't accept being wrong about you folks." "Let her plan," Jake said tiredly. "We've done nothing wrong." "That's just it. She knows that now. But she's too proud to admit it, so she's looking for something, anything, to justify her position." He looked at Rose. "Is there anything in your past she could use against you?" Rose thought of the Union officer she'd briefly loved, the one who'd ordered her father's execution. She'd never told Jake about that part, the shameful secret that she'd cared for her father's killer before knowing what he'd done. "Nothing that matters now," she said quietly. But Henderson's warning proved prescient. 3 days later, a man arrived from Austin. He was thin, well-dressed, with the predatory air of someone who profited from others' misery. "I'm looking for Mrs. Rose Garrison, formerly Campbell, formerly May," he announced at their door. "I'm Rose Garrison," she said, though her heart was pounding. "I represent certain interested parties regarding your first marriage. There are questions about its legitimacy and, by extension, your current marriage's validity." Jake stepped forward. "Get off my land. I have every legal right to investigate potential bigamy, Mr. Garrison. Unless you'd prefer I conduct this investigation publicly." Rose felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She knew what this was about. Harold Campbell had been previously married briefly to a woman who disappeared during the war. He'd thought her dead, had her declared so, but if someone wanted to cause trouble, they could claim the declaration was invalid, making Rose's marriage to him illegitimate, making her marriage to Jake. "Investigate all you want," Jake said coldly. "You'll find nothing but a widow who remarried after her husband's death." The man smiled thinly. "We shall see." After he left, Rose collapsed into a chair. "Mrs. Henderson, she's trying to prove I'm not legally your wife. That would make Lily illegitimate in the eyes of the law, make our contracts invalid, destroy everything we've built." Jake knelt beside her, took her hands. "Then we fight, together like we always do. What if she wins? What if? Then we deal with it, together. Rose, I don't care what papers say. You're my wife in every way that matters. We'll face whatever comes." From the doorway, Lily's voice piped up. Mama Rose. Are you sad? Rose opened her arms and Lily ran into them. Just worried, sweetheart. Don't worry. Papa won't let anyone hurt us. And Uncle Thomas is strong. And Mrs. Harwick is scary when she's mad. We're a family. Families protect each other. The simple faith of it, the absolute certainty in Lily's voice, strengthened something in Rose. She looked at Jake over their daughter's head. Their daughter, no matter what any paper said, and nodded. You're right, little one. Families protect each other, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Outside storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The cattle drive would begin soon, but first they had a different kind of battle to fight. The community had split over them, and now the law itself was being weaponized against their happiness. But as Rose held Lily and felt Jake's hand on her shoulder as Thomas practiced his letters and Mrs. Harwick banged pots in the kitchen with aggressive loyalty, she knew they'd already won the only battle that mattered. They'd become a family. Everything else was just noise. The cattle drive should have been their triumph. 60 head of longhorns, 5 experienced hands, plus Jake Thomas and Rose herself. Despite protests about a woman on the trail, they'd planned for every contingency except betrayal. It started the morning they were to leave. Jake found their water barrels drained, holes punched in the sides. The salt pork was missing. 3 of the horses had been run off in the night. Someone didn't want them to make this drive. We go anyway, Rose said firmly, already calculating what they could manage without. We'll find water on the trail hunt for meat and make do with the horses we have. Old Man Thompson arrived as they were loading what supplies remained. Heard you had trouble. Brought replacements. His wagon carried new barrels, provisions, even ammunition. And these came for you, Mrs. Garrison. He handed Rose a packet of letters. Her hands trembled as she recognized the Austin legal seal. The investigator had been thorough, but there was another letter beneath it from Tennessee, from someone she never expected to hear from again. Rid them on the trail, Jake advised. We need to move. They headed north toward the railroad terminus in Fort Worth, a journey that should take 2 weeks if all went well. Lily stood on the porch, waving Mrs. Harwick's arm around her shoulders. The child had wanted desperately to come, but even Jake wasn't that foolish. Bring me something pretty, Lily called. The prettiest thing in Fort Worth, Jake promised. They made good time the first 3 days. The cattle moving well, the weather holding. Rose rode as naturally as any man, split skirt, allowing her to sit astride rifle across her saddle. The hands, initially skeptical, grew to respect her when she took her turn at night watch without complaint and cooked better than any trail cook they'd had. Thomas proved invaluable with the horses, able to calm them when thunder rolled across the plains. He might be simple, but he had an uncanny ability to sense weather changes, warning them of storms hours before they arrived. On the 4th night, Rose finally opened the letters by firelight. The legal document was what she'd feared, a challenge to her marriage's legitimacy based on Harold's first wife potentially being alive. But it was the second letter that made her gasp. What is it? Jake asked, seeing her face. She handed it to him with shaking hands. It was from Captain James Hartley, Union Army, retired, the man who'd ordered her father's execution. Dear Mrs. Campbell, Jake read aloud. I have carried the burden of your father's death for 15 years. I know you cannot forgive me, but I must tell you the truth before I die. Your father was betrayed by someone in your own community, someone who profited from his death. The orders came from above, but the information that condemned him came from Bill Henderson, who wanted your father's water rights. I have written testimony, witnessed, and notarized. I pray this brings you some peace. Your father was the best man I ever arrested, and killing him the worst thing I ever did. Silence fell over the camp. The hands who'd been listening exchanged dark looks. Henderson, who'd been acting friendly, who'd offered cattle on credit, had betrayed Rose's father. He's been playing both sides, Jake said slowly. His wife attacks you openly while he pretends friendship, probably to keep us from suspecting. A shout from Thomas interrupted them. Riders coming, many riders. They scrambled for weapons. In the darkness, they could see torches approaching fast. At least a dozen men, maybe more. Jake recognized the lead rider, Bill Henderson himself, with hired guns from the border. Garrison Henderson called out, "We need to talk about those cattle you're driving." "Your cattle are back at the ranch, Henderson. These are mine." Funny thing about bills of sale, they can be disputed, especially when the person who signed them might not be legally married, making all her contracts void. Rose stepped forward. "I know what you did to my father." Even in torchlight, they could see Henderson's face pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Captain Hartley wrote me, told me everything, how you wanted our water rights, how you fed him information that got my father shot." Her voice was steady cold. "You've been trying to destroy me because you're afraid I'll find out." Henderson's mask finally dropped. "Your father was a fool helping Union prisoners. He deserved what he got, and you deserve what's coming to you. Nothing. No husband, no ranch, no life here. My wife might be a harridan, but she's useful for keeping people turned against you." "Except she failed," Jake said. "Half the town supports us now." "Not after tonight." Henderson smiled coldly. "See, there's going to be a terrible accident on this drive. Cattle scattered, maybe some people hurt. You'll miss your deadline, lose your contract, lose your ranch. And if anyone gets killed, well, cattle drives are dangerous." The hired guns spread out surrounding the small camp. Jake counted 15 men, all armed. They were outnumbered 3-1. "You'd murder us over water rights that are 15 years gone?" Rose asked. "I'd murder you to keep my secret buried. Your father's land made me rich. That water saved my ranch during the drought of 70. Can't have his daughter showing up now asking questions, maybe having legal claim to what's mine." Thunder rumbled overhead. The storm Thomas had predicted was coming fast. Lightning flickered on the horizon, and the cattle began to stir nervously. "Take them," Henderson ordered his men. The attack came from all sides. Jake shot first, dropping one of the hired guns. Then chaos erupted. Rose dove behind the chuck wagon, firing with deadly accuracy. Her father had taught her well. Thomas, brave Thomas, grabbed a burning branch from the fire and waved it at the horses, sending them stampeding through Henderson's men. The storm broke overhead, rain coming in sheets, turning the ground to mud in seconds. Lightning struck nearby, and the cattle, already nervous, began to mill dangerously. "The herd's going to run," one of Jake's hands yelled. And run they did. 60 terrified longhorns burst through the camp, scattering everything in their path. Men dove for safety. Horses screamed. In the confusion, Jake lost sight of Rose. "Rose!" he shouted over the thunder. A gunshot answered him, then another. He fought through the mud, and rain found her backed against a rock outcropping, Henderson advancing on her with a pistol. "Should have stayed in Tennessee," Henderson snarled. "Should have stayed dead to the world like your daddy." Rose's rifle was empty. She faced him with nothing but defiance. "My father was worth 10 of you." "Your father was a—" Thomas came from nowhere, tackling Henderson with all his considerable strength. They went down in the mud, rolling, fighting. Henderson's gun went off, and Thomas cried out, but didn't let go. "Thomas!" Rose screamed. Jake reached them, pulled Henderson off Thomas, and hit him with every ounce of rage in his body. Henderson went down and stayed down. Thomas lay in the mud, blood spreading across his shirt. Rose dropped beside him, pressing her hands to the wound. "Stay with me, Thomas. Please stay with me." Protected Rose. Thomas said, his simple face peaceful despite the pain. "Good brother protects sister." The storm was moving off, taking the cattle with it. The hired guns had scattered when the herd ran, more interested in survival than money. Jake's hands were rounding up what horses they could find. And in the middle of it all, Rose held her brother, singing softly the same lullaby she'd taught Lily. Jake tied Henderson up, then knelt beside them. The wound was bad, but not fatal if they could get help. "We need to get him to town." "The cattle," Rose said through tears. "The contract. Damn the contract. We saved Thomas." But Thomas, sweet, simple Thomas, shook his head. No. Save ranch. Save Lily's home. He gripped Jake's hand with surprising strength. I can wait. Finish drive first. It was madness, but the young man was right in his simple way. They were only 2 days from Fort Worth. If they could gather the herd, push hard, they could make it get paid and get Thomas proper help. I'll take him to the nearest homestead, one of the hands volunteered. Get him patched up enough to travel. I'm staying with him, Rose said. No. Thomas's voice was firm. Rose goes with Jake. Rose saves ranch. I be brave, like Rose taught me. They had no choice. Time was everything now. They left Thomas with the hand and what medical supplies they had Henderson tied to a horse and began the desperate job of gathering the scattered herd. It took all night and most of the next day to find them. They'd lost 12 head, but 48 remained. Exhausted, muddy, pushed beyond endurance, they drove those cattle like demons were behind them. Rose didn't speak for hours, focused entirely on the task. When she finally did, her voice was raw. If Thomas dies, he won't, Jake said firmly. He's stronger than he looks, and he's got something to live for, seeing you happy. They reached Fort Worth just as their deadline expired, driving 48 muddy, exhausted longhorns through the stockyard gates as the railroad clock struck noon. The buyer, a stern man named Garrett, looked them over with disgust. These cattle look like they've been through hell. They have, Jake said. But they're here, every pound of beef you contracted for. The contract specified 60 head. The contract specified a weight minimum. These 48 meet it. Rose stepped forward, mud-stained and exhausted, but regal as a queen. I have the mathematics here if you'd like to verify. She pulled out a water-stained notebook, showed him figures she'd been calculating on the trail. Garrett checked them twice, then nodded slowly. You've met the terms. Barely, but you've met them. He handed over the bank draft. Though I doubt you'll be able to fulfill future contracts in this state. We'll fulfill them, Rose said. The Double G Ranch keeps its promises. They deposited the money securing the ranch's immediate future, then rode hard for the homestead where Thomas waited. Jake had never seen Rose push a horse so hard, fear driving her beyond exhaustion. They found Thomas alive barely. The homesteader's wife had done her best, but infection was setting in. They loaded him carefully into a borrowed wagon, Rose cradling his head in her lap, and made for home. Dr. Morrison met them at the ranch, took one look at Thomas, and went to work. For 3 days, Thomas hovered between life and death. Rose never left his side, singing to him, talking to him, begging him to stay. Lily snuck in whenever Mrs. Harwick wasn't watching, placing wildflowers on Thomas's blanket. Uncle Thomas needs pretty things to wake up for, she explained solemnly. On the 4th day, Thomas opened his eyes. Rose, did we save the ranch? Rose broke down, completely sobbing into his chest while he patted her back awkwardly. Yes, Thomas, we saved it. Good. Lily needs her home, and Rose needs her Jake, and Jake needs his Rose. He smiled his sweet smile, and Thomas needs his family. Henderson was arrested for attempted murder and conspiracy. The testimony from Captain Hartley, combined with the attack witnesses, was enough to convict him. His wife, suddenly widowed in all but name with her husband in prison, left town in disgrace. Their ranch was sold to pay legal fees and damages, but the real vindication came from an unexpected source. The Austin lawyer returned this time with different news. Harold's first wife had indeed died years before he married Rose. The marriage was valid. Rose was legally Mrs. Garrison, and no one could say otherwise. How? Rose asked, stunned. The lawyer smiled. Old man Thompson hired investigators of his own, found the death certificate in Arkansas, said he couldn't stand seeing good people tormented by lies. The community that had been divided slowly came together. The story of the cattle drive, of Thomas's heroism, of Henderson's treachery, spread like wildfire. Those who'd stood against the Garrisons now found themselves isolated, their judgment questioned. A month later, at the harvest dance, Rose and Jake stood in the decorated barn watching Lily teach Thomas a simple dance step. His wound had healed, leaving a scar he was proud of. Battle scar, he called it, from protecting family. "We almost lost everything," Rose said quietly. "But we didn't," Jake replied, pulling her closer. "We're stronger for it. All of us." Mrs. Morrison approached them somewhat sheepishly. "Mrs. Garrison, I owe you an apology. I listened to gossip instead of looking at truth." "We all make mistakes," Rose said graciously. "What matters is learning from them." The woman nodded, then surprised them both. "The school board would like to offer you a position, teaching mathematics and music. Paid position, if you're interested." Rose looked at Jake, who smiled. "The ranch is doing well enough now. If you want to teach." "I'd love to," Rose said. As the music played and couples danced, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, he'd been a broken man returning to a dead house. Now he had a wife who matched him strength for strength, a daughter who chattered like a magpie, a brother-in-law who'd literally taken a bullet for them, and a ranch that was thriving. The storm had tested them. Henderson had tried to break them. The community had doubted them, but they'd survived it all. More than survived, they'd flourished. "Papa," Lily ran up, grabbing his hand. "Dance with me." Jake lifted his daughter, spun her around while she laughed. Rose watched with that soft smile he'd come to love. The one that said she was home. Was happy was his. Thomas stood by the punch bowl, surrounded by young women who'd suddenly discovered the heroic young man was quite handsome when he smiled. He looked overwhelmed but pleased, catching Rose's eye with a helpless expression that made her laugh. "Should we rescue him?" Jake asked. "Let him enjoy it," Rose said. "He's earned some attention." As the evening wore on, Jake found himself on the porch with several other ranchers discussing plans for the next drive. This time, they'd go together, protection in numbers. Garrison said Peters, who'd been one of Henderson's supporters, "I was wrong about your wife. She's got more grit than most men I know." "She does," Jake agreed simply. "That brother of hers, too. Simple or not, he's got a lion's heart." Inside, Rose was playing piano, teaching a group of children a simple song. Lily's voice rose above the others, clear and sweet. Thomas turned the pages for Rose's concentration on his face as he followed the notes he was learning to read. This was what they'd fought for, Jake realized. Not just the ranch or the contracts or the money. They'd fought for the right to be a family unconventional as they were. They'd fought for acceptance, for belonging, for home. The crisis had nearly destroyed them, but instead it had forged them into something unbreakable. They were the Garrisons of the Double G Ranch. Jake and Rose, Lily and Thomas, even Mrs. Harwick with her gruff love. They'd claimed their place through blood, sweat, and tears, and no one would question it again. As the stars came out over Texas, bright and eternal, Jake went inside to join his family. Rose made room for him on the piano bench. Lily climbed into his lap, and Thomas stood beside them, one hand on Rose's shoulder. Together, they sang their voices, blending in harmony that had been hard-won, but was all the sweeter for the struggle. The Double G Ranch had survived its trial by fire. Now it was time to build something that would last generations. Spring came early to Texas that year, painting the hills with blue bonnets and Indian paintbrush. The Double G Ranch had never looked better. Where once there had been 40 scrawny cattle, now 200 head grazed the repaired pastures. The barn had been rebuilt, the house repainted, and a new well dug near the eastern boundary. Jake stood on the porch at dawn, coffee steaming in his hand, watching his empire rebuild itself. But it wasn't the land that held his attention. It was Rose, out in the corral, teaching Lily to ride Sarah's horse, something he'd never been able to do himself. "Keep your heels down, sweetheart," Rose instructed, walking alongside the gentle mare. "That's it. You're a natural, just like your mama was." Lily beamed, her golden hair shining in the morning sun. "Mama Sarah would be proud." "Very proud," Rose assured her. "And your papa's proud too, watching from the porch like a worried hen." Jake chuckled caught. He walked over to join them, noting how natural it felt now to see Rose in Sarah's split skirt, Sarah's hat using Sarah's saddle. Not as a replacement, but as a continuation. Sarah would have liked that, he thought. She'd always said the ranch was meant to be full of life. "Papa, look," Lily called. "I'm riding all by myself." "I see that butterfly. You're doing wonderfully." Thomas emerged from the barn, moving slower since his injury, but steady. He'd taken over most of the horse training, having a gift that everyone recognized. 3 ranchers had already hired him to gentle their colts, paying good money for his services. "Morning, Thomas," Jake called. "Morning, Mr. Jake. New foal coming today. Mare's ready." It was Buttercup the horse that had carried Rose and Lily to safety during the wolf attack. The father was Henderson's prize stallion, awarded to them as part of the court settlement. It seemed fitting somehow, creating something new from the ashes of conflict. "I'll help," Rose said, lifting Lily down from the mare. After breakfast, they gathered in the kitchen, Mrs. Harwick serving flapjacks with honey, while lecturing Thomas about eating too fast. It was a scene of domestic peace that would have been unimaginable a year ago. "We got a letter," Mrs. Harwick announced, producing an envelope from her apron. "From that Thompson fellow." Old Man Thompson had become their strongest supporter after Henderson's betrayal was revealed. Jake opened the letter, read it, then read it again. "What is it?" Rose asked, seeing his expression. "He's offering to sell us the Henderson Ranch at a quarter of its value. Says he bought it at auction and wants to see it go to deserving folks who will do right by the land." Silence fell. The Henderson Ranch was 3,000 acres of prime grazing land with water rights Rose's father had died for. Combined with the Double G, it would create one of the largest ranches in the county. "Can we afford it?" Rose asked practically. "With your father's compensation money and what we've saved from the cattle contracts, just barely. But it would mean starting over with nothing in reserve." "Thomas should decide," Rose said suddenly. "Those water rights belong to our father. Thomas has as much say as I do." Thomas looked up from his flapjack syrup on his chin. He thought carefully the way he did everything, now taking his time to find the right words. "Papa would want land to do good," he said finally. "Make food for people, make jobs for people, make home for family." He smiled. "We should buy it, make Papa proud." And so they did. The signing took place in town with half the county watching. Some came to gawk, others to celebrate. Rose signed her name with a steady hand. Thomas made his mark with careful precision, and Jake sealed the deal with a handshake that meant 2 ranches were now one. "The Garrison Ranch," Rose said that evening, looking at the new map Jake had drawn. 6,000 acres. It doesn't seem real." "The work's real enough," Jake replied. "We'll need to hire at least 20 hands, repair the Henderson buildings, combine the herds." "We'll need help," Rose said practically. "Good thing the school's on summer break." She'd been teaching for 3 months now, and her students adored her. Several families who'd initially opposed her had come around when their children started excelling in mathematics and music under her guidance. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. 3 wagons rolled up loaded with families Jake didn't recognize. The lead wagon held a woman about Rose's age with 3 children and worry lines that spoke of hard times. "We heard you're hiring," she said. "My husband and brothers, they're good workers. We just need a chance." "Where are you from?" Jake asked. "Arkansas. We lost our farm to taxes. Heard there was work in Texas, fair wages, and honest bosses." She looked at Rose. "Heard specifically about you, ma'am. That you were from Arkansas, too, that you understood hard times." Rose stepped forward. "What's your name?" "Margaret Walsh. This is my husband Tom, my brothers Jim and Samuel." Over the next hour, 6 families presented themselves, all with similar stories. Word had spread beyond Texas that the Garrison Ranch was hiring, that they treated people fairly regardless of background. "We can't hire them all," Jake said quietly to Rose. "We can if we're smart about it," Rose countered. "Look at them, Jake. families with children who'll grow up on the land loyal to it. We don't just hire hands, we build a community. And that's what they did. They hired all 6 families providing housing in the old Henderson buildings, fair wages, and something more, respect and opportunity. The men worked cattle and horses, the women helped with gardens and chickens, the children attended Rose's school. Thomas took special interest in the children, teaching them gentle ways with animals. His simple nature made him a favorite among them, and they followed him like ducklings, learning that different didn't mean less than. One evening, Jake found Rose in Sarah's studio, now converted to a schoolroom. She was preparing lessons, but tears streaked her cheeks. "What's wrong?" She handed him a letter. It was from Captain Hartley's widow. He'd died, but not before establishing a fund for children whose parents had been wrongly executed during the war. The fund's first act was to create a scholarship in Judge May's name. He tried to make amends. Rose said softly, "It doesn't bring my father back, but it helps. Knowing he regretted it, knowing some good might come from it." Jake held her while she cried, understanding that some wounds never fully healed, but could be transformed into purpose. The summer brought challenges. A drought threatened the water supply, but the water rights from Rose's father's land saved them. When other ranches struggled, the Garrison Ranch shared water, remembering how the community had helped them. "We're losing money giving water away," Jake pointed out. "We're gaining something worth more than money," Rose replied. "We're gaining loyalty, trust, the knowledge that we're not like Henderson hoarding resources while neighbors suffer." She was right. When rustlers hit the area that fall, every ranch for miles sent men to help protect the Garrison herds. When fire threatened the eastern pasture, the whole community turned out to fight it. Lily started school that September, proud to be in her Mama Rose's class, but trying hard not to show favoritism. She'd grown inches over the summer, losing her baby roundness, looking more like Sarah every day, but with a steel in her spine that was pure Rose. "Mama Rose," she said one evening, "Lucy Henderson wants to be friends again. Her mama's gone to live with relatives, and she's staying with her aunt. Is it okay if I'm nice to her?" Rose smoothed her daughter's hair. "Being kind is never wrong, sweetheart. People aren't responsible for their parents' choices." The next day, Lily brought Lucy home for lunch. The girl was thin quiet, shattered by her father's imprisonment and mother's abandonment. Rose fed her. Thomas showed her the new foal, and slowly, carefully, they began to heal another broken soul. "You're collecting strays," Mrs. Harwick complained, but her gruff tone was belied by the extra cookies she baked whenever Lucy visited. "We're building family," Rose corrected. "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's choice." Christmas approached with the ranch thriving beyond anyone's expectations. They'd fulfilled 3 railway contracts, sold 30 horses Thomas had trained, and Rose's school had attracted students from neighboring counties. On Christmas Eve, they held a party for all the ranch families. The main house overflowed with people, laughter, and music. Rose played piano while the children sang. Thomas, growing more confident, told simple stories that made everyone laugh. Jake found himself standing with the other men discussing plans for the coming year, feeling like he belonged to something larger than himself. "Mr. Garrison," said Tom Walsh, the man from Arkansas, "we wanted to thank you and Mrs. Garrison. You gave us more than jobs. You gave us hope." "You earned it," Jake replied. "Every family here has made this ranch what it is." Later, after the guests had gone home to their own houses on the ranch, the Garrison family gathered in the parlor. The tree Thomas and Lily had cut sparkled with candles and paper ornaments the school children had made. Presents wrapped in brown paper and string waited underneath. "Before we open gifts," Rose said, "I have something to tell you all." She stood by the fireplace, hands clasped, a secret smile on her face. "We're going to need to expand the house." "Why?" Lily asked. "We have plenty of room." "Not for long." Rose's hand went to her stomach. "There's going to be a baby come summer." The room exploded. Lily shrieked with joy. Thomas clapped his hands. Mrs. Harwick burst into tears. And Jake stood frozen, joy and terror warring in his chest. "A baby," he whispered. Rose moved to him, took his hands. "I know you're scared after what happened with Sarah, but Dr. Morrison says I'm healthy, the baby's healthy, and we have time to prepare." "A baby," Jake repeated, then pulled her into his arms. "Our baby." "A brother," Lily declared. "I want a brother." "Or sister," Rose laughed. "Brother better," Thomas said seriously. "Already have best sister, need brother now." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Jake and Rose stood on the porch, watching snow begin to fall, rare for Texas, but perfect for Christmas. "Are you happy?" Rose asked. Jake considered the question. A year and a half ago, he'd been a ghost, haunting his own life. Now he had a thriving ranch, a daughter who laughed, a brother-in-law who'd become a true brother, a wife he loved more deeply than he'd thought possible, after Sarah, and a baby on the way. "I'm more than happy," he said. "I'm alive again. We all are." "The ranch is reborn," Rose agreed. "Better than before. Not just the ranch. Us, the family, the community. Everything we touch seems to grow." Rose leaned into him. "That's what love does, Jake. It multiplies. It spreads. It refuses to stay small." In the barn, the horses shifted peacefully. In their homes, the ranch families slept warm and safe. In her bed, Lily dreamed of the brother or sister to come. In his room, Thomas smiled in his sleep, finally truly home. And on the porch of the big house, Jake and Rose Garrison stood together, watching snow blanket their land in pristine white, covering the scars of the past, preparing the ground for new growth. The Double G Ranch had become the Garrison Ranch, 6,000 acres of hope and hard work, family and future. They'd fought for this, through grief and gossip storms and rustlers' betrayal and bullets. They'd earned every acre, every moment of peace, every ounce of happiness. And now, with new life growing between them, they stood ready for whatever came next. The ranch wasn't just surviving anymore. It was thriving, sending roots deep and branches wide, creating something that would last long after they were gone. Sarah's dream, Rose's courage, Jake's determination, Thomas's loyalty, Lily's joy. All of it woven together into something stronger than any of them alone. This was rebirth. This was redemption. This was home. The baby came with the summer heat, arriving as dramatically as everything else in the Garrison family story. Rose's labor started during the annual Founders' Day celebration. The whole town gathered at the ranch for what had become a tradition. The Garrisons hosting a feast for everyone, rich and poor alike. Jake carried Rose to their bedroom, while Dr. Morrison hurried behind. Thomas kept Lily distracted with horse rides, while Mrs. Harwick boiled water and prepared linens. The entire community held its breath, remembering what had happened to Sarah. But Rose was not Sarah, and this birth was not that one. After 6 hours of labor with Jake holding her hand and whispering encouragement, Rose delivered a healthy baby boy who announced his arrival with a roar that could be heard downstairs. "He's perfect," Dr. Morrison announced, placing the baby in Rose's arms. "Strong as a little bull." "What'll we name him?" Jake asked, touching his son's tiny fist with wonder. "Henry Thomas Garrison," Rose said without hesitation. "For my father and my brother." Thomas, when told, cried openly and without shame. "Named for me, baby named for me. For the bravest man we know," Jake told him, and meant it. Little Henry, as they called him, grew like a weed, fed by spring rain. He had Jake's dark hair and Rose's gray eyes, Sarah's gentle nature, and his namesake grandfather's sense of justice. By the time he could walk, he was following Thomas around the stables, learning horse language before human speech. Lily appointed herself his protector and teacher, reading to him every night, teaching him his letters before he could properly hold a pencil. "He needs to be smart," she explained seriously. "Garrisons are smart." The ranch continued to prosper. They bought another 1,000 acres when the opportunity arose, hired more families, built a proper schoolhouse that served 3 counties. Rose taught there 3 days a week, the other days managed by a young teacher from Dallas she'd trained. Jake expanded into horse breeding with Thomas as his partner. The Garrison horses became known throughout Texas for their temperament and training. Thomas, despite his simple speech, could negotiate horse prices with surprising shrewdness, his honesty making him trusted by everyone. 5 years passed in a blur of seasons and successes. Then came the letter that changed everything. It arrived on a Tuesday bearing the seal of the Texas governor's office. Jake read it 3 times before he could believe it. "They want to give us an award," he told Rose that evening. "The governor's award for agricultural excellence and community service. Us specifically, the whole family. They mention you by name, your school, the way we've helped other families get established. They even mentioned Thomas and his work with veterans' horses. Thomas had started working with traumatized horses and the broken men who came back from various conflicts. Somehow, his gentle nature and understanding of damage helped both heal. We have to go to Austin," Rose said. "All of us." So they did. The Garrison family, Jake and Rose, 8-year-old Henry, 17-year-old Lily, beautiful and confident, courting the minister's son Thomas in his first proper suit. Even Mrs. Harwick traveled to the Capitol in a special railway car provided by the governor. The ceremony was held in the Capitol building, hundreds of Texas's most prominent citizens in attendance. When their name was called, the entire family walked onto the stage together. The governor, a tall man with kind eyes, shook each of their hands. "The Garrison family represents the best of Texas," he said to the crowd. "They've shown that success isn't just about profit, but about lifting others. They've proven that families aren't always born, sometimes they're built. And they've demonstrated that courage comes in many forms." He turned to Thomas. "Mr. Thomas Campbell, your work with injured veterans and their horses has saved lives. Would you say something to the audience?" Thomas looked terrified, then found Rose's eyes. She nodded encouragingly. He stepped to the podium, gripped it with both hands, and spoke slowly but clearly. "Everybody's broken somehow. Horses, people, families. But broken things can be fixed if someone cares enough to try. My sister Rose taught me that. Jake taught me that. Even little Henry knows that." He paused, gathering courage. "Don't give up on broken things or broken people. They might surprise you." The applause was thunderous. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. After the ceremony, they were approached by a woman in expensive clothes who looked familiar. It took Jake a moment to recognize her. Mrs. Henderson Bill's wife, aged and softened by hardship. "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly. "I was wrong about everything. My pride, my prejudice, it destroyed my family. You rebuilt yours." She looked at Rose. "You could have destroyed me when Bill went to prison. Instead, you hired my nephew when he needed work. That's grace I didn't deserve." "Grace isn't about deserving," Rose replied. "It's about giving people room to become better." Mrs. Henderson nodded, tears on her cheeks, and walked away. That evening, in their hotel room overlooking the Texas Capitol, the family gathered for their private celebration. Henry played with his toy horses on the floor, while Lily read aloud from a new book. Thomas worked on writing his name. Rose had been teaching him, and he could now sign his full name with pride. Mrs. Harwick dozed in her chair, claiming she wasn't tired. "We've come so far," Rose said, standing by the window with Jake. "Remember that first night?" Jake asked. "When you were just the governess singing Sarah's song to Lily." "I was never just the governess," Rose smiled. "Even then, I think we both knew I was meant to be more." "Mama Rose," Lily called. "Tell us the story, the real one." It had become a tradition. Every important day, they told the story of how they became a family. Rose settled into her chair, Henry climbing into her lap, and began. "Once upon a time, there was a broken cowboy and his silent daughter living in a house full of ghosts. Then came a widow with a wounded brother and music in her heart. The cowboy thought he could never love again. The widow thought she had nothing left to give. They were both wrong. Tell about the wolves, Henry demanded. And the cattle drive, Lily added. And when Thomas was brave, Thomas said, touching the scar on his chest, that he wore like a medal. Rose told it all, the struggles, the triumphs, the moments of doubt, and the moments of joy. She told how strangers became family, how a dying ranch became a thriving empire, how love could grow in the most unlikely soil. The most important part, Jake concluded, is that we chose each other. Every day, through every challenge, we chose to stay, to fight, to build something together. Will we always be together? Henry asked sleepily. Always, everyone answered in unison. 10 years later, that promise held true. The Garrison Ranch had become the largest in Texas, but more importantly, it had become a symbol. Families came from across the country to learn their methods, not just ranching, but community building. Rose's school had expanded into a teacher's college. Thomas's horse therapy program served veterans from 3 states. Lily had married her minister and started a family of her own on the ranch. Henry, at 15, was already showing his father's gift for cattle and his mother's head for business. Jake stood once again on the porch at dawn, his hair now touched with silver, watching his empire. But this time, he wasn't alone. Rose stood beside him, Henry on his other side, Thomas coming from the barn, Lily walking up with her own children, Mrs. Harwick, 93, and still fierce, complaining about the cold, while bringing everyone coffee. "Tell us again, Grandpa," Lily's daughter said. "Tell us how you all found each other." Jake smiled, pulled the child onto his lap, and began. "Well, darlin', I was just a broken cowboy who came home one night and found an angel singing to my daughter." The story would be told again and again, passed down through generations, not as a fairy tale, but as truth, that love could heal the deepest wounds, that families could be built from the most unlikely pieces, that courage came in many forms, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the broken places became the strongest parts. The Double G Ranch had become the Garrison Ranch, then the Garrison Legacy. But more than land or cattle or wealth, what they'd built was hope. Hope that second chances were possible. Hope that strangers could become family. Hope that even in the harsh Texas landscape, tenderness could bloom. As the sun rose higher, painting the ranch golden, the Garrison family stood together on the porch. They'd fought wolves and weather prejudice and poverty, their own demons and each other's doubts. They'd won not by being perfect, but by being persistent. Not by being strong, but by being together. Was it worth it? Henry asked his father. All the struggle. Jake looked at his family, the boy who carried his blood, the daughter who carried Sarah's legacy, the wife who carried his heart, the brother who carried their courage, the woman who'd carried them all at various times. "Every single moment," he said, "every tear, every fear, every fight, it brought us here together. That's worth everything." The Texas wind carried their laughter across the ranch, over the cattle and horses, through the schoolhouse, and the homes of all the families they'd helped establish. It was the sound of triumph, not over enemies or elements, but over despair itself. They'd chosen hope, chosen love, chosen each other. And in the end, that choice had made all the difference. The Garrison Ranch stood as proof that families weren't just born, but built, that love wasn't just felt, but chosen, and that sometimes the greatest adventures happen not in leaving home, but in having the courage to create one.